Now listen to what happens. We're told that when Jesus was 30 years old, Jesus comes down to the Jordan River to become a student and a follower of John the Baptizer. You hear what the real story was? Jesus comes down to the Jordan River to become a follower and a student of John the Baptizer. Now let me take you through the way this story was written in 5 different versions to see how it changed over time. Totally amazing. Let's review for a moment. The earliest Christian document was called the Gospel of Mark, written about the year 70, which is 40 years after Jesus is killed. The second one is Matthew, written around the year 80, Luke around the year 90, John around the year 100. And many, many Christian scholars suggest that there may have been an earlier strata of material called the Q material, which is embedded in the Gospel of Luke. What I'm going to show you is how this story emerges and changes from Q to Mark to Matthew to Luke to John. And watch what happens. It's fascinating. In the Q material, this is what happens. Jesus comes down to the Jordan River, and he becomes a student of John the Baptizer. As a matter of fact, he learns the Lord's Prayer from John the Baptizer. I grew up in New York. In public school, we said the Lord's Prayer every day. Our Father who art in heaven, Avinu Shabashamayim, hallowed be thy name, Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah. It's an incredibly Jewish prayer. And we told in the Q material that John the Baptizer was the first person to ever say it. And Jesus learns this prayer from John the Baptizer. We always thought, the whole world thinks that Jesus made it up. But when they meet each other, Jesus goes out of his way to praise John the Baptizer to the hilt. Jesus says in the Q material, he's not just a prophet, he's greater than a prophet. And there's no one born of women that's as great as John the Baptizer. That's what he says. You get to Mark's Gospel, and Jesus comes down to the Jordan River, and he asks John the Baptizer to baptize him, to immerse him, and that's what happens. Very simple. You get to Matthew's Gospel, and Jesus comes down to the Jordan River and says, can you please baptize me, immerse me in the Jordan River? And now John the Baptizer says, I should immerse you, I should baptize you. God forbid, you should be baptizing me. And Jesus insists and says, no, you'll do it this time, and that's what happens. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus comes down to the Jordan River, and it just says he immerses himself in the Jordan River. There's no mention of John the Baptizer at all. And you get to John, the last version, and watch what happens. In John, it's now John the Baptizer who falls over himself, all over himself, praising Jesus. It's John the Baptizer saying, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Behold the Son of God, on and on and on and on. So what happens in these stories is in the beginning, it's John the Baptizer that is the teacher. It's Jesus that's subservient, as a student. And at the end, all the versions are written, it's Jesus that's emerging as dominant, and John the Baptizer is demoted to being a gurnished, a nobody.